Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. Very welcome to this Interculturality in STEM on Greening Higher Education event, co-organized by the UN Office for South-South Cooperation, UNESCO International Institute for Higher Education, and INNOSPEC. Well, let us just get it kicked off with the welcoming and opening remark, highlighting the importance of inclusivity among youth, students, academia, the private sector, civil society, government, underserved youth, and their perspectives in the global South on interculturality in STEM. With that said, it's my great honor to welcome Ms. Dima Al-Khatib, the director of the UN Office of South-South Cooperation, to deliver the opening remark. Dima, thank you so much and welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, colleagues and friends. And it's my great pleasure to be part of this dialogue today on this interculturality for STEM. And at the outset, I want to thank the team at UNESCO International Institute for Higher Education for this outstanding collaboration. And moving forward, few remarks from my side. We meet today at a critical juncture. We are reminded by the UN Secretary General warning that the internationally agreed Sustainable Development Goals are hanging by a thread, and with them the hopes and the dreams of billions of people around the world. He also has made it clear that with the renewed multilateral efforts and the unwavering commitment of all stakeholders, we can uplift those left behind and accelerate progress towards the SDGs. You are our future, the youth is the future, and the world needs your commitment for a better tomorrow. The Summit of the Future is a monumental opportunity to amplify and elevate the voice of youth in the multilateral system. And with youth being the population majority in the countries of the South, youth engagement and targeted support to advance development, their development is central to South-South cooperation. As mandated by the United Nations General Assembly, the UN Office for South-South Cooperation serves as a global advocate and facilitator for South-South cooperation, an important development cooperation modality that brings together governments, civil society, academia, and the private sector to share knowledge, to share expertise and resources in the pursuit of sustainable development goals. And this collaborative efforts creates a vital platform for nations across the global South to address challenges and transcend borders, challenges that necessitate both regional and global cooperation. I'd like to encourage you to explore innovative approaches to developing inclusive and adaptive governance structures, to discuss practical strategies for promoting intergenerational equity, to rethink decision-making processes and advocate for youth-centered mechanisms for long-term governance, global governance. And today is an example of how we can begin to take this forward. I'd like to underscore one of the UNOSSC's key initiatives in partnership with UNESCO IESALC, the greening of higher education through the South-South University Cooperation Network. It was launched at COP28 last year and implemented under the framework of UNOSSC's Global South-South Development Center, thanks to the funding support of the government of China. And this pilot initiative is establishing a network of leading universities from the Global South. The network is collectively empowering students to innovate and to co-create solutions to address critical global challenges, particularly in climate change. It will encourage higher education entities to incorporate sustainability principles into both the curricula and campus operations towards building a green, circular, and sustainable communities. As a key component of this network, the ongoing Greening with Science, Technology, and Innovation Bootcamp has been kick-started, and this is equipping students with the tools and supporting the incubation of the ideas and solutions to harness science, technology, and innovation. Our commitment to inclusive education in STEM is further reflected in the work that we do through our trust funds, South-South trust funds and programs, which continue to drive transformative changes on the ground across the Global South and in collaboration with the UN system. Let me share a few examples. Under the UN Fund for South-South Cooperation, we have an initiative called the Empower Fellowship. It's in collaboration with the International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology. It's been funded with the support of the UAE Zayed Foundation, and it offered young women scientists from least developed countries the opportunities to advance their careers and research in applied science, like domains like biotechnology and genetic engineering, and it provided specialized training and mentorship at the scientific labs where they were hosted. Under our the India-UN Development Partnership Fund, we have supported the launch of the Nicaragua first master's degree program in disability studies with focus on inclusive education. This program equips educators and leaders with the necessary skills to implement inclusive models in schools. Additionally, the initiative is part of a broader South-South collaboration with countries such as Paraguay, Brazil, and Jamaica, where knowledge is shared to develop accessible digital learning resources. A third one was funding from the India, Brazil, and South Africa, which we call the IPSA Fund. Over 8,100 young people in Cambodia have been trained in entrepreneurship development, among which 58% were women and girls. In Malawi and Zambia, for example, more than 2,000 child marriages survivors have received scholarships, providing them with a second chance in education and a pathway to a brighter future. Through these initiatives and other numerous efforts, of course, we at the UN Office for South-South Cooperation, we are committed to fostering inclusive and impactful STEM education across the Global South. Once again, I'd like to extend my gratitude to UNESCO IESALC and all our partners for their unwavering collaboration. And I wish everyone a productive and inspiring conversation today. I'm sure that together we can ensure a better future with South-South and Triangle cooperation. And thank you for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dima, for this very not only inspirational, but very hopeful opening remark that lays a great foundation to start our conversation. And next, if I may, I'd like to invite Mr. Frances Pedro, the Director of UNESCO IESALC, for the following welcoming remark.
Sorry about that. We cannot hear you.
Sorry about that.
Can I insist?
Yeah.
Dima, thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so I was expressing our gratitude to Dima and the whole team of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation. And I would also to benefit from the opportunity of having met today in INNOSPEC through Mrs. Valerie Ray Jerome, the president of the fuel specialists at that company. So thank you very much for being here.
Our pleasure.
Supporting us. There are many ways in which UNESCO feels committed to STEM education and to greening education. In our case, by the way, if you don't know, UNESCO IESALC stands for the UNESCO International Institute for Higher Education, according to the Spanish acronym. So at our institute, we spend a lot of time just visiting institutions and getting to know what people are doing in critical areas for the United Nations agenda, including now, first and foremost, greening higher education. And let me share with you one short anecdote that I experienced just, I think it was less than a month ago in Peru. I was visiting one university. It was in the context of a STEM fair, and a group of students presented a sustainable water filtration system. Okay, something very critical depending on where you live in the world. Their project beautifully merged cutting-edge technology as far as a School of Engineering can showcase, with traditional methods from their diverse backgrounds. When I asked them about their inspiration, one student smiled and said, I'm quoting, "We realized that our grandmothers' various water purification techniques passed down through generations. Each had merit. So we decided to integrate them all," which I think is a nice way of saying that we expect from young people to be not only innovative, and they got the first prize in that fair, but also we would like them to recognize the heritage they are receiving, particularly if they come from, I would say, indigenous context. So I think that this anecdote expresses very much what we at UNESCO and at United Nations, and I think that with our partners as well, we value. In many respects, this personal anecdote encapsulates why I think we are gathering today here. We are addressing two critical global challenges: climate change on the one hand, and inclusivity in STEM education. In collaboration with our partners, the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, INNOSPEC, I mentioned already, but the Global Student Forum as well, UNESCO SDG 4 Youth and Student Network, the UNESCO IESALC Vivo Network, the Youth Advisor for UNESCO IESALC, the University of Sao Paulo, the Global Center for Pluralism, the Presidential Advisory Council of the Republic of Indonesia, l'Observatoire International de l'Université Paris-Dauphine, Africa MUN, and National University of Samoa Student Association. With all these partners, we are exploring how higher education can be a catalyst for sustainability, equity, and intercultural dialogue. And we're doing that with an emphasis on the Global South. Let me say a few words about how UNESCO sees higher education, because we look at higher education institutions, and particularly universities, as being more than simple, well, it will be enough, but more than centers of learning. We consider them to be, or to have the potential of becoming hubs of innovation, engines of social mobility, and catalysts for real-world change. And that's what we are talking about today. At the Institute at UNESCO, we are committed to transforming how higher education prepares current and future generations to address climate changes, among other things. Our approach, and I'm not going to unfold this approach, but say that has 4 key pillars. We're in teacher training and curriculum, because if your teachers are not committed enough with the meaning of greening education, then you are lost. Second, greening science, technology, and innovation. There is a kind of a constant divorce between the requirements of being always at the vanguard when it comes to technological development, and at the same time, making sure that you are respectful for a world that lacks resources. Then the third pillar is greening skills and jobs. And the final one is how can we contribute to making higher education campuses more sustainable, which is already an issue, particularly in the Global South. I would like to reiterate our gratitude to the office, to INNOSPEC as well, and to all of you who are so passionate about this collaboration, which starts probably today. To effectively lead the transition to a sustainable future, our efforts must be inclusive and grounded as well in interculturality. As I said at the beginning with that personal anecdote, we need participatory approaches that engage all segments of society, especially young people from underserved and marginalized communities. Their diverse perspectives and experiences are not just valuable, they are essential in designing and implementing equitable solutions. At the United Nations, we believe that this commitment cannot be simply the luxury of those who can afford it. It has to be a global commitment involving all of us, not leaving anyone behind. STEM education plays a pivotal role in this endeavor. While STEM fields drive the technologies and innovations needed to solve environmental challenges, these solutions must be informed by diverse perspectives, including traditional knowledge systems and the experiences of indigenous, rural, and marginalized populations. This requires intercultural dialogue and collaboration across borders, disciplines, and generations. Today, at the intersection of sustainability and inclusivity, it's vital that equity-deserving groups, including underdeserved youth, have access to green skills and educational opportunities in STEM. Higher education institutions, particularly in the Global South, must lead this transformation, adapting their programs to bridge these gaps. We have to show that also in the Global South, greening higher education is not only possible, but also a merit of the institutions being at the vanguard. At UNESCO, we firmly believe in empowering young people. You are not just the beneficiaries of our work. You are the driving force behind innovation and change. And that's why you are always here in our conversations. Your insights, energy, and commitment will shape, we hope so, the future of education and our planet as well. Through intercultural collaboration, we can achieve a truly inclusive approach to sustainability. And that's why I invite all of you, whether you belong to academia, civil society, industry, or government, or to other friends at the United Nations family, to reflect on our role, your role, in fostering a greener and more inclusive future in, through, and with higher education. We need certainly multi-stakeholder partnerships to reimagine STEM education as a pathway to both environmental stewardship and intercultural understanding. Together, let's ensure no one is left behind in this global movement. Thank you, and I look forward to the thought-provoking, I'm pretty sure, ideas that will emerge from our collective dialogue today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Frances, for sharing the personal story and experience in Peru, and for laying the ground of the framework on UNESCO's work on greening higher education, which is a great example on how policy advocacy and ground practices can merge and join hands and amplify the efforts with youth at the core. Thank you so much. And now, if I may, I'd like to invite Ms. Vali Rao-Jerome, the president of INNOSPEC Field Specialists, to do our third round of welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Vali Jerome. Thanks to Deepen and Frances for introducing, but we are excited to be here with UNESCO and with the UN Organization of South Cooperation. You may not be familiar with our company, so I'll tell you a little bit about INNOSPEC. We're a specialty chemicals company focused on sustainable solutions through science. So we employ more than 400 chemists around the world and deploy $40 million per annum for research and development into new chemistries. That commitment to scientific innovation has made us the world's largest provider of chemistries that reduce emissions from fossil fuels, enable the use of more efficient engine technologies, and enable the use of more biodiesel and renewable fuels. So our customers include major oil companies and mining companies, many of whom operate in regions close to indigenous communities. And that's given us a first row seat to see that indigenous populations can be marginalized in many countries of the world. And we've committed to supporting the social and economic development of those communities in all the countries where we operate. So if you take Brazil, for example, we've been there since 2011 and today employ more than 300 people. We're very pleased to see that the number of indigenous students in universities is increasing. But what we understand from UNESCO is that they've also expressed a strong desire to participate more in STEM-related fields. And we certainly believe all of us will benefit by their inclusion. So we're honored to work alongside all the organizations that are here today to make STEM-related education, training, and professional opportunities more accessible. The thing is, our business is chemistry, so we don't know nearly as much about this as all of you do. And personally, my own exposure providing young people access to education is limited to my own household. They were nice enough to let me bring my daughter here today. She's one of 4 children that we have. We're parenting 4 teenagers right now. If any of you have done that, you know that it might be as difficult as getting the UN member states to agree to the charter this year. It's not going well for us. So I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. But what's unique in our household is 2 of our children came to us by birth, 2 came by adoption from Ethiopia. So we have a diverse set of backgrounds and needs. And as young parents, we made the mistake of trying to give everybody access to the same schools and the same programs so that everyone would have the same opportunities. And for my son adopted from rural Ethiopia, it just wasn't working. I mean, traditional school was not meant for this kid because he was the first in generations of his family to ever have access to formal education. And so I scrambled around trying to find all the tutors and special programs and camps that would work. And it really wasn't until one day, a few years ago, he came to me and said, "Mom, can we try this my way?" And we did. We adjusted the whole approach. He's in a very non-traditional environment now, and against all odds, should graduate from high school in May of next year. And it was a huge lesson to me that I bring to our cooperation today, that you have to honor the perspectives of people that have different experiences than you do if you want to figure out how to realize their fullest potential. So I'm eager to get out of the way and learn from the panelists today who have firsthand experience. And we really especially want to learn about what are the barriers that prevent underserved groups from accessing STEM education, and how is it that corporations and academia and non-governmental organizations can work together to accelerate progress toward our shared sustainable goals. So we're excited to see what we can do together, and thanks for having us today.
Thank you so much, Vali, and a very touching story in addressing what it means by differences and how we can empower those differences into strength and realize the potentials of individuals, which we're hoping to do through our South-South Cooperation Office and through our UNESCO IESALC office in the work with a focus on higher education, and to really support the connection of greening higher education and intercultural knowledge implementation transferred into innovative solutions. Today's discussion will be addressing current challenges and focus on implementation of solutions in the context of interculturality in STEM. And the discussion really aims to deepen our understanding for the various pillars of greening higher education, which Frances just mentioned, and in promoting the equity and inclusion for the underrepresented groups, especially within the Global South, and advance STEM education with a more sustainable future and more effective transferability of solutions. So with that said, if I may, I'd like to invite our first panel participants to discuss on exactly the challenges and opportunities in improving capacities at higher education level to support interculturality with STEM education, especially in supporting equity deserving groups, including underserved youth and students from the Global South. So I think we have all of our panelists here. Awesome. Well, we hope our online participants are enjoying this discussion now. And please know that if you have any reflections, comments, or questions you have, feel free to put in the chat or to put in the Q&A mark that we will either address during the session today or after the session through social media. So first question, if I may, on the strategies to be implemented to empower underserved students and youth in STEM fields, especially in the Global South, really from like a top-down approach. Grace, the trust fund director of UN Office of South-South Cooperation, if I may invite you to elaborate more on this question and share with us your reflection. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lily. I think we already have semi-formal opening remarks, so let me be very informal here. This is a critical topic and why it is important. We already heard that, we are actually in this world, the diversity itself brings strength to our knowledge. And the challenge we feel today cannot miss out the knowledge from, just now you gave the example of the knowledge from grandparents, the heritage, and the knowledge from the young people who are living in a totally different era than some of us in the digital era, and we cannot lose the size of those knowledge. So that is important. And then why the higher education, feels is so urgent to integrate the interculturality for the underserved communities. I think it's not just the gap in infrastructure, for example. In some countries, the infrastructure to support STEM education is not sufficient. It is not just the skills and the opportunities. I think fundamentally it's about a mindset of whether knowledge has hierarchy. So if we think about today, we are here alongside the Summit for Future, we're thinking about how we define a good education globally. Currently, when we look at good education globally, probably a lot of parents and students and faculties and thinking about more the premium universities in the north, and so those are the place that's as if holding the golden key for the future, but that's not true. The real sense of global education should be representing the rich knowledge, the rich heritage of humanity, so that if we miss out the knowledge from the South, from the 130 or 40 more countries, from the communities, then we're not talking about a real global future. So that I think is fundamental. And then when it comes to higher education strategies, I think it is about what you teach. What is the curriculum? Is the curriculum just about those technologies and knowledge that suit some of the countries already proven being advanced? If it's not that to address the global challenges, we need to start from the curriculum co-creation in the intercultural way. And then how you deliver those curriculum. I think there is also a big gap of whether you reach out to the students, the learners, lifelong learners for STEM in the field. And then how do you measure success of higher education in STEM? Whether you measure it just by how many publications that you published in the world-known journals, or you are actually measuring it by the spirit of cooperation and find common solutions and touch people's life. So if we think about all the strategies on what are the curriculum, who creates that, and how you deliver that, who you reach, and then what is the success that you would measure? I think those guide our strategies. And for that, I think Global South countries have already come up with a lot of solutions. A few examples, I'm not an expert in higher education, but from the South-South perspective, for example, I know in South Africa, there is a program that enable they call it mobile laboratories, going to the villages and to let students in the rural areas actually also have the facility of science laboratories. And then also in South Africa, they have this higher education curriculum on biology, integrate the local knowledge of, for example, biodiversity. How do you integrate the local, species and of different animals, plants, and all this into their curriculum? We know that to address the issue of language, Mexico has, this program, national program to deliver STEM education through indigenous language. And then we know, for example, I think in India, there's also this free education on STEM reaching, poor villages and communities. So all these solutions are born from bottom up. Right? And how these solutions can be scaled up to inform policy and inspire others to do more. That's where international cooperation comes in. And that's where South-South and triangular cooperation comes in. And that's why we partner with UNESCO to do this Southern University Cooperation Network. We start from small, just the green aspect and the boot camps. But the purpose of it is not to just stop there. We wanted more partners to look at that and to take it into a scale and cover all different areas. We have opportunities here. Now is the Future Summit, right? And I think last year, the least developed countries have this outcome document of Doha Plan of Action, and that there is a deliverable saying an open university for LDCs focus on STEM. So if we can do something that can actually support the creation of that kind of institution, not just for LDCs, but for the Global South, I think with innovative new thinking, new mindset, new curriculum, of course, leveraging the resources, a new way of delivering, a new way to measure, then our seed planted will have a real impactful fruit in the future. Also, another thing is this future summit, the Pact for Future, it has one very important pillar for future generations. So, I do encourage that our collaboration doesn't look inward just into how our project will be delivered. We also look outward and saying that whatever we gain, small or big knowledge, is not limited by, our borders. We should share that and really break the glass ceiling of knowledge hierarchy. So that's my thought to share with you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace, for this really, really great inspiration. And please let us congratulate the UN Office of South-South Cooperation once again for really the outstanding work that have been delivered, especially under the Trust Fund, because it's not just the resource that it brings. It's also, it carries the trust from the member states from the Global South in believing in the pillar of South-South cooperation moving forward from science to social science to linguistic to youth empowerment. And what you just said, two very key messages really captured our attention. One is on urgency, that we need to be on board. We need to act now because every today can be a tomorrow, but let's do it today instead of waiting until tomorrow. And the other one is the mindset change. Mindset is not something that can be easily changed, which I'm sure Natalie will be speaking in her intervention right after. And it is something that we need to plant the seed today and allow it through the project, through initiatives, or through just advocacy, through policy that can flourish on the ground. So thank you so much. And now, transiting very perfectly to the mindset change, and Natalie, who's a senior education manager for Global Center for Pluralism, affiliated with Global Affairs in Canada. Can you please elaborate a little more on how can higher education institutions adapt their programs to promote interculturality in STEM?
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure and honor to be with all of you today and to be part of this conversation. And I think that we had brainwaves already going. This is such a vast subject, and so obviously I'm going to have to choose a few little things to explore with you today. But I'll be looking at the concept of interculturality, but rooted in a pluralist perspective, which is maybe a bit different than we talk about interculturality sometimes. Pluralism at the Global Center for Pluralism, we see it as a basic ethic of respect for diversity. And I would say even beyond respect, it's the idea of appreciating and valuing truly the diversity, human diversity in all its aspects. And that concept of diversity and culture is going to be intersectional. It's going to be gendered. It's going to be looking at the many ways that our identities intersect in one person, and that also looks at the diversity of the generational, and that is something that to be kept in mind when we look at intercultural. Never to forget that there can be as much diversity and variance within a culture as there are between cultures too. Pluralism is very concerned also with questions of systems and power structures. So in looking at this question with higher education and interculturality, one of the first questions is going to be around those elements. And systems, as we talk about, means what there's outside, but also what's inside. So the mindsets, for example, that you were talking about. And one invitation might be not to fall in the inclusion trap. So people sometimes say, well, why did you just say inclusion instead of pluralism? Well, one of the reasons is that there's a fundamental question around what are people being included into? And what kind of price is requested or forced or coerced to be included into. And so when we look at STEM programs and how higher education is built, I think that no matter where we are, those are really important questions we have to ask ourselves. And what will come from that? I really was listening recently to Yuval Noah Harari, and he was saying how the birthplace of science is an acknowledgement of ignorance. It's when we finally get to a place where we admit that there's so much we don't know. And I think that that is a point where STEM and pluralism meet. That has to be a fundamental mindset. And looking then at how we redesign things, because although access is such an important point, and we can't lose sight of it, that what are we inviting access into is a fundamental piece. And that in French we say revalorisation. I forget in English, I think it's revaluing. So that idea of revaluing of knowledges, one idea that comes immediately to mind is in Canada, we have problems with all kinds of forest fires. And forestry programs that have integrated traditional indigenous knowledges have much better management of forests and avoiding the catastrophes that we know now through those traditional practices that have been, and in many places in higher education still are, kind of, well, this folklore, you know, it's another category of a ranking of knowledges and not respected for the quality of knowledge that it actually is. So, and in terms of STEM, from the standpoint of, are we working from an idea of mastery over nature, which is an epistemology, right, that kind of brought us to where we are in this conversation. So other forms of knowing that might have relationality as a fundamental principle in terms of what we talk about STEM, is that something that is there space for that? Is there legitimate, not just a little visit, not just a little event, but really something that's part of how we structure and how we share power? And just to finish, I think higher education needs to build holding environments where we can truly explore and value and appreciate different knowledges and really have those profound conversations. And looking at innovation always calls things into question, right? Inevitably it will. So do we have holding environments where that power is, the power dynamics are taken into account? Because in most intercultural models and intercultural competency models that we know of, the issues of power dynamics don't appear in there. And if you're going to do it from a pluralistic standpoint, that has to be in there. And then another point to finish with, in those holding environments, multi-partiality is really making sure that everybody has what they need at the end of the day is an important principle in pluralism, and it's something that shouldn't be left only to intentions. What ways does higher education programs have to track the impact of their programs, and is there actually the intention, is it meeting the impact, or how do we know what we need to adjust and address? Yes, I would leave it at that. It seems a bit high level, but at the same time, these are fundamental questions that I think we often avoid because they're complicated, or they can be.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Natalie. I know you talked a lot about barriers and challenges, but what I'm hearing our hopes and opportunities as well. You mentioned power dynamic, power structure quite a few times, but what you also address is on the reevaluating knowledge and what we have as human beings, as individuals, as organizations, what choice do we actually have in bringing into the knowledge system to support with the intersectionality of identities, to support with the intergenerational approach that can move us all forward together. So thank you so much for this. Let me kindly remind all of our online participants, we do have interpretations in sign language, in Spanish and in Portuguese. And if you're hoping to switch to a different language, kindly just switch to the bottom of Zoom and click on interpretation, and you'll be able to select the language as you like. So if I may, now transiting to barriers, I'd like to turn to Nally, who's a UNESCO IESALC BIBO Young Innovator member, to reflect on a little more on the current barriers to ensure that STEM education is accessible and inclusive, but not only inclusive, but also pluralistic for underdeserved groups.
Thank you very much. So I'm Naila Pariamachi. I'm a student from University in Lima, Peru. So what the experience I bring to the table are experience as a student, as a current student, but as well the experiences I have from the friends that are pursuing different STEM majors, and not only in Peru, but also here in the United States. And talking about barriers, I could not talk only about the STEM barriers, barriers on STEM, but on only like higher education barriers, because where I come from, having an education, it's most of the time a privilege. According to the Secretary Youth in Peru, only like 16% of the total population has access to higher education. And having seen the data from the different regions, perhaps in the capital, I think it was like 16%, and then from Ayacucho, a rural part in the highlands of Andes, where my grandmother is from, is like 8%. And also having in mind that not only all the people that goes into higher education finish the higher education because of the different issues, the different responsibilities someone has to take as a youth and as a student. So to me, not only talking about these barriers to only accessing higher education are important, but also like having seen the different barriers that we have to access quality education in only like the quality. Because recently, at least in Peru, there has been like legislation reformation that reduces a lot the requirements for private universities to have the minimum requirements for having a quality education. So I am asking right now, like, how can we, like, from this underrepresented group, access only to education, but also like the quality ones? Because nowadays everyone can have a university and anyone can give any kind of program in universities, not having the minimum requirements that much of the STEM majors needs. So that is from one side. But as well, I wanted to remark on the importance of having this multicultural understanding and bringing the unique perspective we have in the global south. For example, I have a friend that works on medicine. She's pursuing her undergraduate here in the United States, and she comes from an indigenous community. And she was speaking to me about how different was education in Peru that it was here. In here, like, at least she has the opportunity to bring this unique perspective she has, like, for example, thinking about the use of natural medicine that have been preserved throughout generations in the highlands of Andes, and how she has the opportunity to make like little research in there in comparison to the opportunities she had in Peru. So, and it's not only that, because there's also a huge problem on the brain drain of the STEM major professionals that are not usually connected with the current pursuing students that we have in Peru, having like a huge gap of understanding. And perhaps I live here the opportunity to have this kind of network that works for mentoring new students that are pursuing these barriers, even like indigenous students that are pursuing these careers, and how to bring this multicultural cosmovision into their professional lives. And continued on that side, like, I was also thinking about how I work on youth participation. I'm currently here for the Summit of the Future. So I was just yesterday during this Just Youth Blast, which is a pre-event from the Youth Action Days and the Summit of the Future. And when I was there, like they say, how many of you would like to discuss on technology, discussing science? And there were only like 2 people from all the room. So having this in mind, I will say that there is a huge opportunity to bring these people that are working on STEM majors, that are working in the professional sector, to not only like be the adults that are discussing these topics, but bring like students from actual universities to be part of the global discussion that are being taken this week in the United Nations. And also like something that was really interesting that they mentioned was they're currently discussing the Global Digital Compact. On the beginning there was not a youth perspective or a student perspective, and now like what they say that is that currently they were fighting for them, and at least they have like a little part that mentions youth and the importance of having this into this Global Digital Compact. So I will say that it's important to have like youth access to quality education. Think about the different problems we have as global south in the governments, in the accessing resources, thinking about the cosmovision we have, but also having these students at a seat at the table so they can choose and they can give the inputs into these global decision-making spaces that are taken into higher education systems. So yeah, basically, thank you.
Thank you so much, Nela, and also thank you so much for sharing those stories that are real, happening in real life. And I was just thinking while you're talking about your friends who are doing medicine research on the preserved, approaches from her own context in the US, I was just thinking, okay, if she's actually not the one doing it, who would actually be doing it? Or would anyone be interested or have the knowledge to do it? We don't know. But what we know is that when we talk about access and quality to higher education or education overall, it's not one way. It's not just higher education institutions or schools providing the access or quality to students. It's also the knowledge, especially the intercultural knowledge, that students can bring in to enhance the quality of the education and to provide universities with the access to certain knowledges that are not widely available. So really, thank you so much for bringing in this perspective. While we're talking about barriers, it's also a reminder to our higher education institutions that higher education institutions are not just a provider. It's also a beneficiary throughout this process, and we need to work together with the students in moving forward. So with that said, thank you so much to Grace, Natalie, and Nela to the outstanding and interconnected discussion and the challenges and opportunities. And if I may, now I would like to invite our panel 2 speakers, Mr. Marcial, Ms. Allen, and Mr. Francesc. Yes. Yeah.
Seeing me much.
So we hope we can capture to be able to. Okay, good. So the second panel, following the very first panel on challenges and opportunity, focuses on the integration of equity deserving groups and intercultural knowledge and perspectives into STEM education and higher education, with the emphasis on the role of academia and civil society in promoting interculturality in STEM. So this is a very hopeful panel just to start with, because we're talking about what's possible and what has been done. If I may, I'd like to first invite Marcial, the associate professor from University of Sao Paulo, who's also the lead on the project that we're running on greening higher education with the UN Office of South-South Cooperation as a leader university from the Global South. So Marcial, if you may please, can you reflect a little more or give an example on in what ways can academia, private sector, and civil society collaborate to advance intercultural and intercultural understanding in STEM education, considering your background in electronic systems engineering?
Okay, so thank you very much. First of all, to the United Nations, to the organisms, particularly to UNESCO and the South-South Cooperation. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here to talk to you. And I would like to bring some examples or some experiences that we have in Brazil. First of all, you are asking me to talk about the relationship between academia, the society in general, companies, and it's for sure very important. In the area of STEAM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, it's really a key issue, and we need to make students and young students motivated to work towards pursuing a career in these areas. We see worldwide there are perhaps nowadays not as many students that are really interested in these things, but these things are really challenging and they can bring a lot of opportunities for the young students. In relationship to the society and companies, and in comparison and in companion with the universities, we are all acting in the same direction. So we need to give the students as academic good quality, but as society also opportunities for these young students. We are talking also about the diversity that is offered and is requested nowadays. And for instance, in the University of São Paulo, we have recently a new provost office that promotes the integration of new students coming from marginalized societies, the inclusion and belongingness. And we see that's really a big challenge for us, but it's really truly important because we need to give these students coming from these poor societies, not just in the city of São Paulo, but mostly in the city of São Paulo, but all around Brazil, opportunities to step ahead and to give their families opportunities really to have better life qualities. I can give some examples also in relationship to the internationalization. So nowadays, the University of São Paulo, and particularly the engineering school, we are quite engaged in internationalization. We have many students having double degrees in European universities mostly. But we intend also to give these opportunities to these new students that are coming from the marginalized societies. And one problem that we foresee is that once it's really hard for them just to come to the universities due to the costs or time delays that they need to come from where they live in the city of São Paulo to the campus, it would be really unfeasible for them to think about going abroad. And then with opportunities that we might have with companies that could be supporting for scholarships, the University of São Paulo itself has some scholarships that we give to the students, but we need really much more from these scholarships in order to allow these students really to pursue their careers. We also see that in relationship to this formation and background from these students, that many of them are really great students. They really face problems at the beginning, but once they get into the system, they step ahead and they are very, very good. But for many of those, they really need to have some kind of special care in order to continue their studies. And as I mentioned, one of the reasons for this new provost office is really to try to bring these students from one side, support from the professors, from their own colleagues, but also perhaps financial support in order to be to have the opportunities to study. And once they come to the moment to have these international opportunities, if they really deserve those because they are really good students, that they could really take these opportunities abroad. And then take into consideration the importance of this internationalization and the meaning of what we are discussing here about multiculturalism. It's very important for us, and at USP we have even a logo that say internationalization at home, because we are aware that it's not possible to send students all around, but it's also important to bring students to the university and to give our students at the campus the opportunity to be involved with colleagues from abroad. But for all those that are going or coming, the importance of getting in touch with different perspectives, different realities, different mindsets, different ways of thinking. And all this is really very, very rich. And the youth students really are so happy when they have these opportunities, and through all of those things that they have, that perhaps for sure the engineering, the foundations, the backgrounds are very important. But even more than that is all the life experience that they get when they are traveling around, when they are studying for 1 or 2 years around, and also when we are receiving the students in our university. And just to finalize also, perhaps among some of the issues that we have, one example that we are very successful running for more than 20 years is a fair called Febrace, that gives students from all around Brazil the opportunities to come to the University of São Paulo for 1 week in a fair, which is very competitive. And nowadays it's already very well known. So all students start preparing their projects. And so there is a selection process, because we are not able to receive all those students, but we have hundreds of groups at a kind of boot camp. And these students are really, it's amazing to see how they are enjoying the opportunity to come to the seat. And many of those 1 or 2 years later, because I'm talking to students that did not enter the university, so these are in the high school, okay, that they come back to the university, and that was really the opportunity that brought them about engineering, science, technologies, and all these things. So actions like this or boot camp, and we are very thankful for you to inviting us, are just a few among many other examples that are really very important to promote students or to engage students in this area. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcio, for really showing us on what can be feasible and what can be done. And what you mentioned on internationalization at home that's being practiced by University of Sao Paulo, it really sounds like it's also being practiced as interculturality at home as well. And the diversity practices and the additional support being provided to students from marginalized background is not only an example of leaving no one behind, but also how to keep people ahead. And this is a very important message, because a lot of times when we think about underprivileged contexts or adequately deserving groups, we always, or maybe the first intuitive is that, okay, they need help, but it's not the case, because they have so much to bring on the table as well. And when they are actually brought up to the speed on how regular, let's say, operations are being conducted, they actually can take the lead in moving it forward into solution designs and solution implementations that can truly be contextualized. So thank you so much for showing all that. And what we would really hope is now we want to move to Alan, who is UNESCO IESALC Youth Advisor on our capacity building program, and also Global Student Forum former steering committee member, and the SDG for Youth and the UNESCO SDG for Youth and Student Network member executive committee at this moment. So a question to you, Alan, hope that we're not putting you on the spot, because it's a pretty big question, but it's on what roles can student organizations and youth networks play in promoting equity and inclusion in STEM education in collaboration with different stakeholders, especially or including the UN.
Fantastic, thanks, Lily. I'm one of those students actually dealing with technical difficulties at the moment. So if I could kindly just pass over my phone and you could access the internet through that, because unfortunately my technology is not allowing me. I'm from New Zealand, and New Zealand is not allowing me to access the internet.
Okay.
Kia ora koutou, ko Alan Dixon tōku ingoa. I'm Alan, I'm from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and while we're trying to access that part in this space, thank you very much to UNESCO IESALC for this opportunity to be able to come here today and discuss this important topic with you. While I come wearing a number of different hats within the space, one of those core hats being engaging with STEM in Aotearoa, New Zealand. One of the things that we've been doing is attempting to integrate Indigenous voices, particularly into that space of higher education, and ensuring sustainability in this context of like ongoing engagement. Thank you to those who are attempting to, I do have some of my notes here, so I'll start from that, and hopefully Eliane will be able to work out that process behind the scenes. So one of the things that I'm quite drawn to is the statement by French chemist Louis Pasteur, my apologies for my French speaking not being particularly good, who states that science knows no country because knowledge belongs to humanity and is the torch that illuminates the world. Science is the highest personification of the nation because the nation will remain the first which carries the furthest the works of thought and intelligence. I agree with Mr. Pasteur that students and academics in STEM subjects do already share a form of science diplomacy. We often talk about the science crosses borders and typically does cross borders in the same way, even further and earlier than public diplomacy that was done in higher education institutions within these spaces when managerialism was introduced into their structures. This was done naturally because those who are interested in STEM subjects already interconnect very actively. And it was not done singularly on commercial purposes, which it largely is now by institutions and publishing houses, which we see. I find it interesting that the language of the Antarctic Treaty in 1959 signed in Washington, DC was seen as a political Magna Carta of science within these spaces, where we see this sort of intersection of this narrative where the building of science diplomacy was largely focused around, you know, the ability for that to not only cross borders, but build relationships that would sustain beyond the political structures that we have currently, although that was done in the context of the Cold War, and ironically follows the same structure of what impacted the student union movement, which I was from in that process. Thank you very much. So I want to challenge the Honourable Mr. Pasteur regarding his perspective in stating that science and technology have achieved universality through a world-changing innovation in sectors such as education. I come from a nation where patents based on trade decisions often drive STI funding, where Western empirical systems are pitted against indigenous traditional knowledge. And we have public letters sent back and forth between academics as to which is considered the most superior. We have early career science researchers, they're the ones I work with, who are paid an absolute pittance. They're paid very minimal amounts and they can barely afford to do their work. So we do not have a sustainable structure. Science may be a global language, but it is clear that that language is only accessible to some people groups, some socioeconomic groups, some cultures and ages do not have the luxury of speaking that language actively. In this sense, it is kind of contradictory that we have a sort of universality within that space that is claimed within science, when in reality, that's not always accessible. Coming back from my notes within this space, my apologies that my digital side of things is deciding to be interesting. When we're engaging with student and youth organisations, what we're doing is helping them engage in capacity building because they typically already exist within our traditional higher education structures in their ability to work with STEM subjects. So we have student unions are the ones that we majorly work with and youth organisations focusing on STEM subjects. And we do that because to us, in the idea of sort of Louis Pasteur's vision, that's the visa process for getting across these borders of the nationality that then ends up within STEM subjects. We know obvious elements in relation to this, such as inequity for women and girls in STEM subjects, that is well known, with UNESCO reporting that women make up only 35% of STEM graduates, which is a very concerning statistic. We also identify that in countries such as this one we're in at the moment, the USA, minorities are more likely to transfer out of STEM subjects and stay in them than majority cultures. Some of these communities experience what literature calls a double bind. So they're not only experiencing being marginalized for one factor, but for several. For example, they might be marginalized because of gender and then marginalized because of ethnicity on top of that. But I actually propose that there's a triple bind, and it's age. Youth organizations in particular know this. They've been working on STEM inclusion programs specifically. That's traditionally what we see them involved in. I recently came back from Thailand where I was working with a young activist from Cambodia who has decided that because there's not enough support in curriculum for use of AI, she's going to create her own initiative for women and girls. And that is what she has done. She's partnered with schools at the local level. And in so doing, she has supported changing the curriculum in her local community with the schools there. And she's a university student. She just took it upon herself to do that. She's also built into the relationships with the private sector so that they can have an ongoing partnership to address gaps in skills development, which currently exists within Cambodia. These types of initiatives are to fill spaces in our visa process for science and are done through the creativity of young people in these communities. Student unions, on the other hand, we're a little bit more of an activist voice. I'm sure you'll be aware from Latin America. More in the context of supporting the advocacy of STEM-based engagement. A lot of the areas that I worked in STEM-based engagement for student unionism is particularly including the conversation concerning the exploitation of early career researchers, often which includes individual advocacy cases, whether it be on access to labs or library information, but also the ability to deal with management structures within higher education institutions and the partnerships going on to work that are being public or private sectors within those spaces. And what we typically see is that they need communities of practice, which is what the student union ends up operating as. And the reason they need communities of practice is because they feel that they are not able to connect with other people within their field on that subject in such a way that they are able to create a sort of interdisciplinary knowledge. So one of the things that we do is cross-disciplinary sharing between different parts of the sciences, which often results in other types of initiatives. We've ended up with school-based initiatives. Particularly, there's a group in New Zealand I work with that focus on indigenous engagement in school systems and curriculum. And they decided that they wanted to do that because they connected a university through one of our structures. And this has allowed for an area in genomics, which is the area that they're looking at. They're suggesting that the indigenous community in New Zealand would be advantaged by the idea that science could connect with thing called whakapapa, which is to do with your lineage and your heritage. So this is an example where advocating for these spaces and these communities of practice can be quite significant. Another context to consider is in the context of Africa, where research provision is not particularly good to early career researchers. How are you going to create a STEM structure in workforce development and ongoing into policy and further education if you don't actually pay for your STEM researchers to be sustained in that space? The issue for young people is when we are not contributing to the conversation on STEM at a governance level, technology is still shaping our digital citizenship, which spans, as Mr. Pasteur says, across borders, because our classrooms and our lecture halls are not singularly focused on human rights, but how the transhuman is now actually connecting from a digital ethics perspective, and also the socio-economic disparities that it creates. This is where the UN is essential. For example, the South-South University Cooperation Network, who we have there, it's wonderful to connect with you there, and the initiative that's currently being connected to with UNESCO IESALC aids in the sort of transcending of these physical borders and moving back into the grassroots community in that context, which is exactly what young people are particularly asking for within these spaces. We have the capacity with the current arguments on open research and open data to enable young people to access this science diplomacy and utilize it as part of their digital citizenship within that space. For example, WIPO's adopting of the Treaty on Intellectual Property, Genetic Resources and Traditional Knowledge also then causes us to create these structures where we can relook at the idea of what is knowledge, how are we valuing it, and who does it belong to within these contexts. And those are the types of structures that we need to enable students and youth who do not have physical access or sometimes knowledge access of these spaces to be able to engage in them. Increasingly too, we must remember that these conversations on digital citizenship and the transhuman in our classroom will encounter conversations on peace and security. We can't ignore that factor. That's why we're here with the Summit of the Future. They did when Mr. Pasteur made his statement because it was during the period of the Cold War. And with the move to cybersecurity, questions on the use of AI and accessibility of digital tools, this is not actually just a factor that young people will experience in part of their lives. Generation Alpha will experience this for the entire period of their lives, and their whole lives will be influenced by data. The student and youth organisations of the future, therefore, will need public diplomacy from groups like the UN to intervene for them in these spaces to ensure that they do have access to the world. The domains of their life inside and out of the classroom will be fully impacted by these spaces. STEM will lead in that discussion, particularly with the Global South rising and how it is. We need support from intergovernmental bodies, private bodies, public institutions and NGOs, to ensure that we truly do have access to the torch that illuminates the world. Thank you. Sorry for my technical difficulties.
Thank you so much, Alan. I mean, we're now really seeing the power of student advocacy because it's not just talking. You have listed very solid action points to the stakeholders that are sitting here on some of the inspirations and takeaways that we can mobilize on in terms of translating into concrete actions moving forward. So thank you so much. And I just realized, apologies from my part, I got a little too excited in the last panel that I really wanted to applaud to everyone because everyone's intervention was awesome, but I got too excited and directly jumped into, responding. So if you don't mind, let's give another round of applause to Natalie and Nayla as well. Okay, and now, well, I'm not sure, Frances, if you're being put on a tougher spot after Alan
Of course.
with everything that she has listed, but it will be wonderful if you can address how can traditional knowledge system be integrated into concurrent STEM education to promote more pluralistic curriculum, research, and community engagement.
Yeah, I'm going, well, I have a short answer and a long one. The short answer is I don't know. Yeah,
But we will-
yeah, yeah, exactly. But we hope that through a project we are going to launch with the support of INNOSPEC, we're going to really find, I would say, promising avenues. But let me elaborate a little bit on some things that have already been mentioned by Professor Lobo and certainly by Ellen. Because I think that approaching the integration or the integration in many ways of traditional knowledge and wisdom into traditional from an academic perspective, higher education systems is just, in a way, is looking at the problem from a very limited perspective. Because as you rightly pointed out, the issue of traditional knowledge always intersects with other barriers, like the ones we are experiencing, for instance, when it comes to languages and gender as well. Okay, so let me just provide you with two examples based on our own experience at the UNESCO Institute that are going to show you how complicated these things are and how important these kind of initiatives could be. Now, first, let me give you the example of a 25-year-old academic journal that UNESCO has been publishing on the, I would say, global theme of higher education and society. Okay, it's mostly about higher education policies around the world. And 5 years ago, we decided that we would have not only articles in English, but also in at least one article in one, I would say, indigenous language. Okay, well, nice, right? Yeah. Okay. We have been successful over the past 3 years in getting one. The question here is that first, you don't have specialists in higher education policies whose works, even if they are speaking, I would say an indigenous language, they haven't published in that language. So the references, it's quite funny to see that, you can read the article in no matter which language, but the references are all in English journals, so it's quite funny. It's like not really accounting for the patrimony that already exists there. That's the first question. And the second one is that they do not find, how can I say, any incentive in their research careers to see that one of their articles is published in one language that is partly understood by, maybe 2 or 3 other scientists. So they miss the incentives. That's one way of putting the problem we have with integrating these, I would say, traditional knowledge, is that the way in which this knowledge is kept is through a particular language and culture. And they do not intersect necessarily with the, I would say, mainstream science, so to say, or STEM. That's one thing. Second thing is about gender, which I also mentioned. I'm not going to say the country, but in one of the works, one of the projects that the Institute is now working on is about the participation of young girls and women in STEM programs in a, I would say, developing country. I'm not going to mention which one. Okay, we started 3 weeks ago, the field work, visiting a number of institutions, mostly in rural areas, not necessarily in the big cities, okay, in rural areas. Okay, and believe it or not, we had an episode where one of our researchers, a female one, was object of, I would say, harassment. So the question for me is, how can you really start a conversation about, attracting women, for instance, in rural areas to STEM programs where, the most important authorities in the institutional settings, say universities or institutes of technology, are even capable of thinking about, harassing someone who comes from the outside. Okay, then we got also in other areas, we heard about cases where, well, that's usual maybe in other settings, where female students have to gain their promotion in their files through, I would say, non-academic activities. Okay, let's put it that way. That's really, so the intersection, as you rightly put, between I would say, the complexities of languages and cultures that we are forced to preserve, okay, and respect, and cultural values that are against not only, I would say, the integration of female students, but also against the integration of traditional knowledge, I mean, is really important. Okay, so you could think, for instance, UNESCO has many ways in which we incentivize that female researchers working in STEM are well known. And some of them, we have what we call the L'Oreal. You may know the L'Oreal because of the cosmetics. And okay, we have the UNESCO L'Oreal prizes, okay, which every year go to substantive female researchers contributing in the area of STEM. Okay, and some of them are located in the global south. Okay, well, yeah, it's good because in a way we show that this is possible. Okay, that some female researchers can have success, but certainly this is not enough. Why that? Because frankly, if we are going to prioritize the integration of traditional knowledge, this wouldn't come without a cost. Okay, and I would like to insist on precisely that, because let me give you two examples of what one I consider to be not necessarily best practice, and I would avoid that. And the second, which is really good practice, but comes with a price tag. Okay, I wouldn't say bad practice, but certainly I'm not going to support that, is the idea that, okay, you have traditional STEM, meaning by that traditional, I mean academic STEM in regular universities, and then you have institutions that are recognized as being part of the higher education system, but manage in their own indigenous language, keeping their own, I would say, programs, not necessarily, interacting with the traditional STEM programs. Okay, well, in a way, if you consider this to be better than nothing, that's fine. But frankly, shouldn't we ask traditional universities, I mean, Western style universities, to really embed into their programs that traditional knowledge, the same as where can you study an indigenous language? Tell me one university where you can do that. Well, you have to go to these non-traditional universities. So you are creating, as a matter of fact, while being convinced that you are promoting traditional knowledge, as a matter of fact, you are in a way blaming them and putting them in a second league as compared to the traditional STEM universities. Okay, so that's an example that I wouldn't support, but nevertheless, people keep telling me, okay, it's better to have this than nothing. Well, if you consider that a transitional initiative, that's fine. But frankly, I don't believe that this is going to leave us very far away. The second one is to really create dedicated programs in traditional universities. Okay, that comes as a cost. Why that? Because as I said, you don't have so many researchers whose research career or academic career is based precisely on researchers done on the basis of traditional knowledge, because it doesn't sell. You know, you are competing in a system of research incentives that does not consider yet that this is really, you know, an alternative way of making change to nature or to people. So I think that if you have to really benefit from that traditional culture, you need to create innovative pathways, and these will come with a price tag. Okay, and the price tag of making sure that the ones who are the weakest part in this dialogue, the ones representing traditional knowledge, get real incentives, you know, to cultivate that and to promote that. And I think that we are very far, unfortunately, we're very far from that. So that's why I think this project that we will be initiating soon, I mean, is really an opportunity to map out possible pathways, you know, for us to make sure that this dialogue exists and is not necessarily harming any of the two worlds. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francis. You touch upon a very, very important point that before intercultural practices or knowledge, there needs to be cultural. It can be interconnected, and when it's also interconnected with other factors such as gender or what Alan mentioned on age, what can we do and what choices can we make in the preservation?
Allow me to say, I think that you phrase it better than I did. I think that you need to recognize that there is a traditional knowledge there, okay? But you need to recognize, you need to acknowledge that this knowledge exists. Okay, that's the point. Otherwise, there is no possible dialogue.
Exactly. And as long as we have only received one out of many years, it's a good start.
Yes.
We start with one. We're hoping with joint efforts from joint partners, we will be able to move into the two recommendations that you have made and actually have more in the future, not just in the journal, but also in the ground as well. Thank you so much. Yeah. So now we have successfully concluded our second panel and moving forward with the third panel, if I may. Allow me to invite Alain, Audrey, and Elizabeth. So the third panel, while we're welcoming our third panelists over, will be focusing on the role of international cooperation among governments, the private sector, and the civil society in promoting unity and collaboration for a greener, more sustainable, and more environmentally friendly future with a focus on the contributions and leadership of young people. So with that said, Alain, I want to turn to you first and kindly allow me to introduce you first. I think that's more appropriate. So Mr. Alain de Warman is a personal assistant to the Presidential Advisor, member of SMART team, to the Presidential Advisory Council of the Republic of Indonesia. So from your experience, how can government, private sector, civil society, and academia work together to accelerate progress towards sustainability goals through South-South cooperation and global collaboration?
Thank you, Lily. It's an honor to be here. Really nice meeting you all. So it's very important to first have the realization that governments, private sectors, and civil society must work together hand in hand in terms of sustainability, in terms of achieving sustainable development goals. And South-South cooperation offers a very unique opportunity to share knowledge, resources, and best practices within developing nations, creating like a more equitable and collaborative framework for tackling sustainability challenges such as climate challenges. And from the side of government can provide enabling policies, regulations, promote sustainable practices and technologies by setting frameworks. Like in the context of Indonesia, we're trying to setting up framework for carbon pricing mechanisms, and then green finance, and promoting innovative ecosystems. Governments lay the groundwork for sustainability. And from the side of the private sector has the potential to make innovations and to scale solutions. Companies, especially like those involved in renewable energy, agriculture, and things related to like waste management, other sustainability issues, they can drive sustainability through investment in green technologies and business models that emphasize circular economies. An example would be public-private partnerships, PPPs in renewable energy, where the government collaborates with industry players to accelerate transition pathways. As for civil society, they also play a very important role. They play a key role in advocacy, holding stakeholders accountable and ensuring that voices from local communities, including indigenous groups and under-reserved population, are included. Civil society organizations, they are instrumental in grassroots projects and scaling successful small-scale models. So a unified framework under the South-South cooperation can leverage these strengths, facilitating knowledge exchange in sectors like energy transition, climate, smart agriculture. And then if you would, maybe I can give like a concrete example, like Indonesia, South-South cooperation between Indonesia and other countries. It could be like Indonesia cooperating with fellow developing countries, I don't know, maybe Thailand, learning from the practices of developing countries who have already developed like floating solar panels. They can co-develop like a sustainable renewable energy projects. They can also adapt best practices in terms of renewable energy policies to increase energy access and resilience, while also creating opportunities for green jobs for the community, as well as young people. When talking about youth leadership, young people are very critical in these efforts, because especially through like STEM, Indonesia actually has some examples. We have this program called Indonesia Mengajar. If translated to English, it would be Indonesia Teaches. So this program encourages students in bigger cities to go to the rural areas to teach, because as we know, like Indonesia is an archipelago. We have thousands of islands, and development in different areas are different. Most development are focused in the island of Java, where the capital city is. But if we go, like last time I went to Papua, which is the most eastern part of Indonesia. The curriculum that schools teach in that area is different with what we have in the island of Java. And some high school students, some middle school students, they are sometimes they cannot even read properly. They cannot even write and read properly because of the lack of school infrastructure, the lack of access to technology, the lack of good teachers. So they just don't have equal access to education. So before we talk about youth leadership in the sector, I would like to also stress that it's important that we make sure there is equal opportunity for education for everyone in the world, in the country, to make sure that they can all grow together. And Indonesia also have like eco schools where they teach, where they put sustainability at the core of the education, because I feel like it's very important to have sustainability mindset since we are young, because education would be a very important tool to ensure that the future generation, they can also put sustainability as priority. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Alon, and very holistic statement that pretty much covers infrastructure, resources, teachers, or human capacity, and runs from as young age as possible all the way to lifelong learning, which means every stakeholder has a role to play. So thank you so much for mentioning that. And also public-private partnership, it's definitely on the very high priority of partnership approaches that UN is running. For example, the project that we're working together with the UN Office of South-South Cooperation, upon conclusion of the innovation designs through the bootcamp, we will move to the transfer phase, involving specifically also the private sector in assessing what can be feasible, moving into actual practices to benefit more people. And thank you for also mentioning knowledge exchange, which I think quite a lot of our panelists mentioned from our panel 1 and panel 2. So knowledge is really the key term that's moving from, the power structure in knowledge creation, in knowledge choices, and now to knowledge exchanges, which eventually will need to be landed on young and be concretely transferred into the support, which young people can mobilize those knowledges they have as tools in order to move into action. So thank you so much for this really, really holistic approach. And also, thank you for mentioning how many beautiful islands Indonesia have. We all know that. And our next speaker, Andrea, is also from a very beautiful island, Samoa. Representing, so Andrea is representing the National University of Samoa Student Association representative. And I also want to highlight before presenting the question to Andrea that this 2024 is a very special year for small island developing states, because the UN hosted the 4th international conference for small island developing states in terms of sustainable development. And this is a conference that only hosts every 10 years and have this very directional, in a way, strategies in moving forward. And it is really time to work across different contexts, especially the marginalized areas across different islands that we face. So Andrea, if you don't mind, can you please elaborate a little more on what role do young leaders play in shaping policies and practices for a greener and more sustainable future, especially mobilizing your experience from the perspective of small island developing states? Thank you.
Hello, Falava, everyone. My name is Audrey.
I'm really, really sorry. I'm really bad with pronunciations and names.
It's all right.
But just to make you feel better, sometimes I don't even pronounce my first name correctly.
Yes. That's a little bit.
Okay.
Hello, Falava. My name is Audrey, and my presentation will be mostly on Samoa because this is what I'm most familiar with. I am standing in for our regional representative, so I'm only representing 10% of the SIDS, unfortunately. But I will be trying my best to present as much as possible, so you're able to understand the circumstances and context of my country. So first of all, I'd just like to address some of the comments in some of the panel discussions that we've had today. Most of my panel discussion will be on that since I'm very ill prepared, unfortunately, but I will be addressing a lot of the talk that we've had today. First of all, what role do young leaders play in shaping policies and practices for greener and sustainable futures? I have also a short answer and a long answer. So my short answer is nothing. The longer answer is, well, there is some advocacy, some young leaders who are trying their best in these particular areas. When you take one in the thousands, in the hundreds of thousands that we have, it's really nothing when it comes to trying to make a change. Hence, nothing as my short answer. The reason being is, unfortunately, countries such as Samoa have bigger problems. When we talk about higher education, which is one of the main themes of this discussion, is that the people who need this higher education, who should be targeted in getting this higher education, the marginalized, people with disabilities who rarely have these type of opportunities, they're left out of this conversation, such as today, unfortunately. So when we have these talks about inclusivity, we have to take into account as well equity in trying to alleviate these bigger problems that they have. Not only do we have this barrier of language that we've mentioned before and gender, we also have this barrier of, like I said, disability. We also have this big problem that we have in SIDS, which is poverty. When it comes to trying to address inclusivity of indigenous cultures in universities, why not also can we include indigenous universities, or as was mentioned before, non-traditional universities? We can talk all we want about having more people in universities that are indigenous, but at the same time, these universities aren't targeting and addressing the context that these people are coming from. I do acknowledge that there are scholarships to try and capture these this potential that we have for young leaders. However, when you take one individual to another country, you're learning about the context of that country. You're learning about how we can build in that country without taking into account their local country, their national country of the scholars. So what role do young people play? It's a very nuanced question. It's a very broad question, unfortunately. I can't address as much as I'd like. But when it comes to also young leaders playing a role in a sustainable future, there is this, when we talk about small island SIDS, small island developing states, we're talking about a large group of islands. Even when we talk about LDCs, this is a large gap between people. We have China and then we have Samoa. This is a huge gap in not only population, we have a huge gap in technology. First, there's a lot of people, young people left behind when it comes to digital literacy. And so when it comes to sustainable futures, we have short-term projects that I've seen with trying to develop young leaders. However, in the long term, for example, we say we need to have young people have higher education. Okay, do they have jobs to step into after this higher education? A lot of the times in small SIDS, you don't. And so your options are either to upskill, which is costly for people who are already in poverty, or you need to move out, which is a loss for the country when it comes to potential. And I think that is the as much as I'm comfortable covering. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Audrey. Let us give you some hope to begin with. If I may, given the approval of our director, Frances here, that I would like to share the outstanding youth strategy work that have been conducted at UNESCO IESALC in actually integrating young people into the decision-making of policies and practices. So we started our formal collaboration with the Global Student Forum last year, which entails in three different aspects. The first one is that we have reserved our youth observer seat on our governing board, which young people will be directly there, invited to take the floor and comments on the decisions that the governing boards have made, but seeking consultation with the room and the flexibility for making changes. So that's at policy level. And at policy as well as practice level, we have assigned one youth advisor to each major line of work at UNESCO IESALC, including each major projects we have. And your friend Alan sitting next to you is actually our youth advisor supporting with a line of capacity building. So she's involved in reviewing the documents of capacity building program that are to train university rectors, university professors, different stakeholders in the integrating the comments and the expertise from young people on what you need. So let's say there's hope, and we would encourage you to join us for the third work that will be starting later this year on co-designing an institutional guideline to support with universities' integration of meaningful youth engagement to be further engaging young people at institutional level for policies and practices. So this is to Audrey, but also to other young people out there that we are working and we are making progress one step at a time, but we're going to do it together. And thank you also for bringing in, the large gaps and once again highlighting the importance of the mapping exercise that needs to be done before going into any context and understanding what's going on instead of just putting labels of, countries or clusters together, and really understanding that there are diverse types of universities and there are diverse potentials for young leaders to realize a different scope at your choice because the future is yours. So thank you so much. And with that said, I would like to invite our third panelist, Ms. Elizabeth Ibudo, who is the co-chair of the International Observatory of University in Paris called Dauphine for scientific pedagogy and curricular. And the question that I would want you to elaborate more is on how can international partnership foster a unified approach to addressing global environmental challenges, especially in the global south. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lily. And it won't be easy to come after the brilliant presentations. So my current position is head of OPC Finance for retail banking at BNP Paribas Group. And I use my free time, weekend and holidays to work and impact as much as positively possible sustainability, well-governance, DEI, and word as DNA. Any action that can foster SDGs. This is why I am here today with you, and I am very happy to. So thank you, both United Nations and UNESCO IESALC for the invitation to contribute to this roundtable on interculturality in STEM and specifically holistic greening higher education, and making my holidays a great time of co-working, partnerships, collaboration to improve SDGs worldwide. Your question, Lily, is very interesting, and the answer is not that simple. Actually, and Amy for many, I am committed to a balanced world that fosters contributions and leadership of young people. I launched the model of United Nations in Africa 10 years ago, onboarding more than 200 persons, academics, corporate institutions, governments, civil society, universities, and young people from the different continents, and covering all the STEM topics and beyond. One of the greatest output of those moons was the gain of confidence of this youth and the consent of its leadership. Most of them, because of their role, their leadership during the simulations, decided to launch their own projects and had more courage to take initiatives that they thought very impossible. We achieved this because of our model of partnerships, co-building all along the value chains and each stakeholder at its appropriate role, including coaching, mentoring of the youth, because the youth is decision maker of tomorrow. I want with academics, of which Professor Renoir from University Paris Dauphine PSL, EQUIS-Label, we founded the Observatory of Higher Education to foster innovative partnerships that improves youth leaderships, entrepreneurships, standardized curricula, and diploma in higher education, with some projects underway in Africa, for instance. And when I say Africa, I mean anyone, people, companies, civil society, government, institution interested and or concerned by the continent for business, family, or leisure. I also got in 2021 the COP label, thanks to my model of innovative partnerships and to apply on the energy transitions in sub-Saharan regions and the environment preservation and climate change. We have achieved all of that by ourselves, and we could do much more worldwide with more support and resources. So this roundtable with all the partners is very welcome. Our action needs strong and sustainable visibility to soar and impact more widely both young leaderships and SDGs improvement, where it is the most necessary, people of global majority and countries which higher education underperforms. My advocacy today and here, and keeping it short, factual, and simple, relies on both the achievement to date and the innovative partnership model I built to onboard multicultural stakeholders as partners and co-actors for all the projects I manage or I select to support. I have no doubt that our live here today to move faster and wider as an accelerator for sustainability is the United Nations label for our activities, supporting initiatives that foster SDGs KPIs, and e.g., the innovative models in higher education, the young leaderships, the entrepreneurs, the green and ecological initiatives, and most of all, the virtual museum of slavery and Black trafficking. This is part of my today contribution, advocacy to get the United Nations label for our activities. Another point that I want to address is a call to both UN Environment Fund and any partners to support and fund our initiatives which help drive positive impact for the environment, out of which combating mercury pollution. I heard you work on chemistry. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I mean, it's a very great to be hearing your story, carrying your role at the private sector, and also have this very corporate social responsibility mentality in mobilizing your own resources to support with sustainability initiative, which we see with a lot of companies, and we greatly call for more engagement from the private sector in supporting through your corporate social responsibility with the initiative that can benefit our planet together. One highlight, just very quickly, what you mentioned on the visibility. You know, what really touched me is that it's very important for us to understand that we do things that's awesome, but it's very important that we actually let other people know what we're doing and what works. It is by default a practice of exchanges, and it's by default a practice of impact dissemination so that we can engage more people. So don't be shy. If you're doing something awesome, let the world know. So that is the end of our third panel. And as I will be providing well, okay, first of all, I think we have asked a lot of like $1 million questions already. And we are going to ask the mega zillion-dollar question to conclude, which is actually proposed by one of our participants online. So while I provide this zillion-dollar question, I would like to invite Vali and Frances to the front to prepare for after the zillion question is asked. Before we conclude for the event altogether. Okay, so the zillion question asked is that what are the recommendations for integrating interculturality in STEM? It's a huge question, we know. And if possible, yeah, and if possible, we would like to have each one of our panelists to propose a really short, one sentence, maximum 30 seconds, on one call to action in the recommendation for integration of interculturality in STEM. Okay, I did something very similar back in July with using a Tibetan bell, on the the end of the 30 seconds. I don't have the Tibetan bell today because my friend is not here. So I will just use the clap if that's okay. And I'm not gonna put anyone on spot. So I will take volunteers and then we will go from there. 30 seconds, one call to action for the integration of interculturality in STEM. And don't worry, if we need more time to think about it, we would also send an email to everyone on the panel today to make a 30-second film so that we can widely disseminate across our social media and call for participation from a wider audience. But if anyone is interested in answering the $1 question with 30 seconds.
Lily, can I?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, please, after you.
Start from
Yeah.
the top.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. Here we go.
Okay, just start from what we have, the boot camp, and re-evaluate your boot camp. Have you done anything in the boot camp to integrate interculturality? Okay.
Awesome. 15 seconds.
You?
Oh,
Okay.
Professor Lope, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so address to the young people, be passionate in your choices, have a strong commitment with your career, whatever you want to pursue. In engineering, science, technology, there are really great things, but very important, you need to have contact with people from different backgrounds, from different places, and that's really a key point in your what is expected to your life. So the relationship with different people.
Awesome. Perfect.
Yes.
Thanks. There's so much that could be said, but one thing I will say is invest in our own learning in terms of all the people involved in doing these transformations for intercultural learning as lifelong learning. It is, if anyone tells you that they've achieved this intercultural competence and they're done and they're just applying, you can move on to someone else. Just commit to that learning.
Wonderful.
I think that the call I'm going to make is for ourselves, because I think that we need to do more. I mean, I'm talking about the United Nations system, to provide visibility to other ways of dealing with the world that surrounds us and with other people as well. So we need to look at the other side, which is not necessarily the traditional one we have.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's great to imply universities. So I talk about the University Paris Dauphine. There is another one famous with famous professor Jean-Bernard Ouedraogo and Elikia Mbokolo, who is already an ambassador of United States. And I think working with academics will be helpful to build specific curricula.
Thank you. Okay.
So I want to call to build stronger bridges between higher education, equity, deserving groups, underserved community, and the private sector. So how? First is to integrate inclusive STEM curricula. Second is to expand access to resources. Third is to promote intercultural exchanges. Fourth is to amplify the voices of underreserved youth. And finally is to build stronger networks between all the stakeholders. Thank you.
The bell rang before I'd begun. I'm done. Yeah, I think mine would be that we need to stop seeing Western empirical science as opposed, I think you said previously, to traditional knowledge. Also, because a lot of traditional knowledge already includes an intergenerational model of engagement and a climate orientation. We need to be holistic if we're wanting to respond to how STEM's going to engage in the world in the future. And that includes young people in those models of traditional knowledge. Thanks.
Well, I will say like, first of all, 2 points. Universities need to support more youth to have a seat at the table at decision making in spaces of STEAM, like this week that is being made. And second, I would call to all you, to students in higher education, to not let the decision makers jeopardize our access to a real quality education in general. Thank you.
Okay. My call to action is to recognize your privilege, first of all, and to, if you have anything that you are passionate about, no matter what age you are, there is a space for you and you can make a change. You just need to take a step forward.
Anyone else? No?
Awesome. Good. Well, we hope this is quite a lot of takeaways that whoever you represent and whatever stakeholder settings you have, that you will see the relevancy of some of the recommendations that have been made by our very great minds from our panelists. So with that said, before the conclusion of this session, we want to thank once again to our UN Office of South-South Cooperation in embarking on the very pilot projects on greening higher education with us at COP28 last year in December. And we would also want to announce that the whole work on greening higher education have really advanced this year, with more and more partners joining us across the 4 pillars that Francesc presented in the opening remark. And with that said, I would like to invite Francesc and Valley to make an exciting announcement that's taking place under the framework of greening higher education institutions.
I let you.
Okay, I just want to thank you all for the valuable perspectives today about the barriers that students face accessing STEM and how organizations like INNOSPEC can partner with other organizations to make solutions more available. I don't think we can solve all the problems that we discussed today, but I'm eager to get to work. And so hereby want to launch the partnership between UNESCO and INNOSPEC and see what we can do to better serve organizations in the Global South.
Wonderful, wonderful. Can I add to that?
Of course.
Yes. Well, I would like to express our gratitude on behalf of UNESCO, because I think that it's not so often that we get opportunities, as you were mentioning, by the way, to engage the private sector in a conversation that it is actually very difficult in nature, because it's really challenging our life systems in a way, our economic models, our way of dealing with the environment, and the way in which we relate also with vulnerable communities and traditional knowledge. So I really, I would like to express our gratitude for making that effort, which I'm pretty sure is going to turn out to be really an opening opportunity for all of us. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to everyone, and let us plant more seeds and let's water them together so that they can grow into trees to protect us all. Thank you so much, and thank you so much to our online participants as well. We will be following up with your questions and comments, and we'll also upload the recording so you will be able to replay the session. And please follow up with us on our social media as well, because we will be having videos of recommendations coming from our panelists and more. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.